What's up, guys? Welcome to the James Boudreau podcast, where I sit down with people from all walks of life to talk about their stories, experiences, and ideas. This podcast is brought to you by Watson Motors, the official studio sponsor. If you're in need of a Jeep, Ram, or Dodge, or whatever, these guys have you covered with great deals and even better service. So hit them up in Manistee, Benzie, or Ludington, or check them out online at watsonmotors.com. Listen, support the people that support the show. Now let's get into it.
Oh, okay.
but I think
maybe
it's
I got
probably
some bad
still relevant. No,
information.
I think it's accurate.
We're rolling. I mean, we can
Sweet.
jump in if you want.
Yeah, let's do it.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I know you had a long drive. And,
I'm ready to rock. I'm caffeinated. I'm ready to go.
and you can play with that however you want.
Yeah,
however
as long as
comfortable
it
you
sounds
need.
good, I'm good.
Well, I hope it sounds good. It's always my fear. That's why I run two cameras.
Yep.
Because I'm like, one of these days. I did a whole podcast with a good friend of mine. It was like a little over 2 hours long. And the camera wasn't on.
Yeah.
So then we looked at each other and said, all right, let's try to do it again. Turned everything on, and so we sat for like 5 hours. But
I've had a number of experiences like that. Luckily, not too many, and not too recently. But yeah.
So, dude, like I was saying before we turned the cameras on, it was like I've been kind of, watching your social media and kind of getting to know you through that.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of chat with Jesse, of course, your folks. Eventually I would like to jump into the Iron Fish side of things.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But I really want to know, first of all, how you have time to do all the shit that you're doing. So, like you said, you haven't updated LinkedIn in a while, but based on LinkedIn, it looks like you have like 5 or 6 jobs.
Yeah, right now I have 3 jobs officially.
Okay. So are you still coaching hockey?
So I have not, since COVID, I really have not had much time to do that. Unfortunately, I mean, hockey's been a lifelong passion of mine, growing up in Marquette in the UP. It was since I was about 6 years old. That's been like a top passion in my life, and started coaching hockey in Detroit at Clark Park in 2015, and I coached there until about COVID. So still involved a little bit in what they have going on there, but happy to provide a little context for that later too. But yeah, that's one of my passions for sure.
One of many. Well, when I was doing my research, you're a graduate of Michigan State University.
This episode is brought to you by Brandon Ball, broker-owner of Dwelling Realty, Keller Williams, Northern Michigan. Are you looking to sell your home? Then look no further. When you list your home with Brandon Ball, you'll get a trusted advisor who will guide you through the entire selling process. With extensive knowledge of the local market, he'll help price your home competitively to attract the right buyers. And with proven marketed strategies, your home will be seen by the most qualified of buyers. With 17 years in the business, you'll have someone experienced who's on your side. Contact Brandon today to get started selling your home. 231-690-4981. That's 231-690-4981. Or Brandon at dwellingrealty.com.
But your bachelor's degree is in, like, community planning.
Yeah, so I went to Michigan State, and before that, I played high school hockey in Marquette, and thought I was going to play junior hockey, and went and had a cup of coffee in Canada for junior hockey for really just a couple of weeks in Hamilton, Ontario, and they. I was a goalie, and they said, we're going to basically ship you to the minors of, at that time was junior A, and said, we're going to ship you to junior B in Buffalo. And I said, I better go to college instead of doing that. And that ended up being one of the best decisions that I made, because it set me on a really cool trajectory. So
Is that junior hockey stuff? Is it you ever watch those goofy ass reels when they make fun of like the hockey players?
Oh, there's a ton of truth to it.
Yeah,
a ton of truth to it. And I had a lot of friends growing up in Marquette who spent, their 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old years chasing that dream in God knows where, Canada. And they all had, great experiences doing it, but ultimately it was, like I said, one of the best decisions I ever made to not go down that route.
So, but you took the route of community planning, which but because I'm really interested in how you went from that background to get that degree to move forward. Because like I had our city manager on the podcast the last episode, and very much that's what he went to school for. That's what he's doing today, and you're doing something totally different.
Yeah, and there is sort of a common thread. It's sort of a long story, but I'll get into it.
We got all day.
When I went to Michigan State, we were driving from Marquette down to MSU, and my dad Richard went to Michigan State as well, and I had thought that I wanted to go for hospitality business. They have a great hospitality business school at Michigan State, and I worked for a couple months on Mackinac Island in the hospitality industry, and it became very apparent to me very quickly that that's not the career that I wanted.
So you've got two life choices. I'm not going to be a hockey player, and I don't want to manage a hotel.
Yeah, and really the hockey player thing, I truthfully wasn't good enough to do that, so I'd want to get that out there for sure. But and so I kind of had no idea what I wanted to major in, and I had to make that decision, at least on paper, relatively soon. So I got to talking with my dad about what he went to school for, and he told me about urban planning, and it's sort of like business in the sense that it's extremely broad. There's so many different fields within it. There's transportation, there's community planning, there's community development. So there's a lot of different routes that you can go with it, and I thought that sounded like something I'd be interested in. So I said I'll sign up for it and I'll try it. And through that process, it was good for me because it was a really small school within a massive university, and being from a small town, it felt good to be in a small program with sort of the same people, maybe 20, 25 kids in our class. And how it played out was I got a real interest in like the community development side of it. It was just a really fun social thing, as well as professional thing. So I got into the world of like event and community development in East Lansing, and was working for a professor doing some community development and urban planning. And oddly enough, my capstone project was in Frankfurt. And this was before Iron Fish was even a thing. And so my whole senior year, we worked with the city planners in Frankfurt, and that was just sort of a luck of the draw thing. We each got assigned a different community around the state to work with for a semester to help their local planning department. And a joke that I always make to my friends and family whenever we're in Frankfurt is one of the things our group was responsible for was putting up all the wayfinding signs like 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now, right? So the little like orange and blue signs that say like beach this way or marina this way. So that was a fun project to work on during my senior year. But how I got into sort of the photography and video production side of things
You're good.
is an interesting story, because I've always been a fan of digital media and cameras in particular. And while I was at Michigan State, one of my roommates was actually in fresh off a couple deployments, and he was a sniper in the Marine Corps. His name is Logan Stark, and he is now the one of the marketing directors for Black Rifle Coffee Company, a huge company. And so
I get their coffee.
Yeah, so he was my roommate in college.
Check out a Black Rifle coffee mug somewhere in here.
I bet you do. They're everywhere. And while we were in college, I was roommates with him and his brother. And while in college at Michigan State, Logan made a documentary about his time in Afghanistan for a school project, essentially.
Do you remember what that's called?
Yeah, it's called For the 25. It has literally millions of views. And so he made that project in school, and he submitted it, and it sort of overnight blew up, and it was getting tons of play on YouTube. It got into film festivals, and I saw the impact of that type of long form storytelling, and I was extremely captivated by that, not only by like his story, but just the whole process that he went through to tell it. And simultaneously, going back when I was in high school and even earlier, I had a cousin who was in NYU film school, and my younger brother was in one of his films when he was at NYU, and he later got a film into Sundance. So I had these influences in my life to kind of take example from of how cool that world is and what type of experiences it can give you.
Yeah.
So really that experience of having my roommate in college make that film, it also coincided with Michigan State University opening up a student business incubator that now is pretty huge. It's called, at the time it was called the Hatch, I believe. And
Is this in 2013?
Yes.
In
INFYER,
Fire
yeah,
LLC.
yeah.
Nice.
So
This was on my list. I wanted to talk about the Clark Park documentary, but
yes,
we'll get
and so we'll definitely get there because we walked into the student business incubator because we heard that it opened, and we were one of the first groups of students to walk in there. And they would never do this today, but at the time they actually were so excited that we walked in that they purchased us a camera. And we started an LLC. They gave us some web design, did all the paperwork for us, and so we're like, let's start a video production company, and that's how that started. So one of our first projects was like filming music at Michigan State, and I had some friends that I had made through a study abroad trip to Cuba who were in the jazz program at Michigan State. The following year, one of their professors is from Trinidad and Tobago, and they had a trip to Trinidad, and we convinced the Michigan State Jazz program to allow us to document that trip. We didn't know what we were doing. We were begging, borrowing, and stealing cameras from different departments. We didn't really know how to work them or run them, but we tagged along for a 10-day trip in Trinidad and Tobago and made like a little 2-part series of the jazz program
wild, dude.
doing that. And so that was like
Wow.
the first real hands-on experience I got, and that was in 2013. And now we had a means of getting clients, making money. We had something to show them as well, like this is what we did. And so going to school at Michigan State really provided a great network to get into some of that stuff.
Let's stay on this for real quick because I want to. This is just so interesting to me. So you got like no experience with any of this stuff. Went and shot this. I mean, what was the editing like? I mean, you had to have been like learning.
Yeah, it was very much like learning on the fly, and my good friend and business partner Steve Stark, who is the younger brother of Logan, was actually in school for media production. So he did have some experience. It wasn't specifically for video production. It was just generally media studies. So he was at least knew his way around editing programs. I had grown up editing videos when kind of at the dawn of YouTube. My brother and I would make home movies with our folks' cameras, and to like add music over what we were shooting, we would actually take like a Walkman headphone and put it up against the microphone of the camera while we were recording. So it was always like I said, something interesting and fun to me. So
Sounds like how I edit today.
Yeah, and so having that sort of baseline of doing that trip to Trinidad and Tobago, making like a little 5-minute documentary series about it, really sort of propelled us to want to pursue that as a career. And the next step was graduating and figuring out where we wanted to move, and Detroit was on the top of the list. It was very cheap to live there. I was a huge fan of Detroit sports growing up, and at the time in 2013, the Red Wings were getting ready to play an outdoor game at the Big House against the Toronto Maple Leafs for the NHL Winter Classic. And at the time, HBO did a behind-the-scenes sort of Road to the Winter Classic series, and I'm, like I said, a hockey nut, so I was watching all of that stuff. And in one of those episodes, it was like a 4-part series, and in the first or second episode, the crew followed the team to a place called Clark Park in Southwest Detroit, and the Red Wings donated a Zamboni to this outdoor ice rink. And I was like, that place looks awesome. I want to check that out. So I moved to Detroit the following year, and when winter rolled around, I just showed up to the park with my skates, stick, and a helmet, and knocked on the door. I heard they had hockey practice on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights. I just showed up, and a guy named Anthony, who's the director of the park, answered the door. I said, "Hey, I'm Troy. I heard you guys have a hockey program here. I would love to coach." And he said, "Yeah, come with me." And he opened a door to about 40 kids and their parents and said, "Hey, everybody, this is Coach Troy."
That's awesome.
and they had other coaches there too, but I was like, "Whoa!" Just like, okay, here we go. And so that sort of started a really important period of my life where I was at a time where I had some part-time jobs, but I could spend a ton of time at this park in the winter. And Clark Park is kind of right in the shadow of the Ambassador Bridge to Canada, Southwest Detroit, Hispanic neighborhood, and not your typical hockey demographic,
Sure.
right? And the story behind Clark Park is fascinating because the city of Detroit used to have about 10 fully functioning outdoor ice rinks. And when the city went through its financial struggles in the late 80s and early 90s, a lot of the rec centers closed. And along with that, those ice rinks were shuttered. And the reason why Clark Park stayed was that the people who utilized the ice rink the most went to the city and said, "Hey, give us the keys. We're going to keep this going." And so it was just kind of a rudimentary ice rink, sort of plywood boards, and they kept it going through the 90s, kept flooding the ice themselves. It's a over 100-year-old brick building that the actual rec center is. They started a nonprofit called the Clark Park Coalition to keep some programming going. There's baseball fields there where kids show up, and basically it's like a sandlot type situation. And so I just fell in love with the place. And before I started there, they actually got a $1 million grant from Wayne County, and the NHL helped a little bit to build a full regulation outdoor ice rink with boards,
sick.
glass, a compressor to keep the ice cold. And that's what I walked into in 2015. And for the next couple of years, I got permission from the folks who ran the board of the nonprofit, as well as the parents, to just film and document what was going on. And over the course of the next couple of years, while I was coaching, my brother would help me out. My business partner, Steven, would help me out. I did a lot of the filming. And we basically came up with a storyline that was 6 or 7 folks that were interviewed from the ages of 8 to 85 to kind of show the impact of the ice rink on all the folks that experience it. And it was just a passion project. I wasn't getting paid anything to do it. And it was a period of my life where I could just focus on it, and I was coaching and playing hockey there as long as I could. But it was a super short season, right? And it's like maybe 2 months, 2.5 months if you're lucky with the weather. And so with that, after a couple of years, we were like, all right, it's time to actually make something. We have to stop eventually, right? So we made a 25-minute long short film, and it got into 15 film festivals.
Is that on YouTube?
It's on Vimeo, yeah.
Okay,
and it's just
Vimeo?
called Clark Park. And looking at it now, it's pretty rough, and but it's still I'm still super proud of it. And ultimately, I sent it to some folks who work with the Red Wings, and they referred me to a position with the NHL that was brand new at the time, which was called a live social contributor. So that's kind of the dawn of professional sports leagues adopting social media as a viable, career and job position. And so the league had just started this position, and 2018 was my first year working for the NHL.
I feel like the universe is just pushing you into the direction that you should go. You know what I mean? Like it's like I'm just listening to you. It's one decision, one meeting, one person is just kind of connecting these dots, which is
Yeah, it's
truly,
incredible.
You seem blessed.
Yeah, it's
You know?
it's extremely. And there's one other really fun story that I'd like to tell about the Clark Park film in particular. So my cousin, who's the filmmaker that I referenced earlier in the conversation, he knew that the White Stripes and Jack White were from that neighborhood in Southwest Detroit. In fact, they have a song called Hotel Yorba. That's one of their bigger hits, and Clark Park is right next to Hotel Yorba. And while I was also, I should mention, working for the park at the time, so helping schedule the ice out for people who would rent it, helping schedule events at the park for the nonprofit. And one day, Anthony, the park director, walked in and said, Jack White just called, and he's going to build us a baseball field. Because that's where he grew up playing baseball. And so later that summer, sure enough, there's a crew there, brand new brick backstop, and Jack White brought his kids to Clark Park and played baseball for a day. No media, just and I have some pictures from that because I was working there at the time, and some of the kids that I was coaching at the time were also, of course, playing baseball. And they kind of knew that he was someone special, but I was telling these kids, I'm like, that's a rock star. There are not too many people in this world who are actual rock stars.
Yeah, that dude's a rock star.
And that man is a rock star that you're playing baseball with right now. And he hung out all day. And I was about to finish the film at the time. And I actually got some inspiration from my cousin. They were like, you should write him a letter and see if you could use some of his music. And so I wrote his manager a letter. I was like, I'm not going to make any money off of this film. We're going to use it to fundraise for the park. And they allowed us to use two White Stripes songs in the film, and we actually had the premiere of the film at Third Man Records in Detroit. I guess it would have been in late 2017. So that was a wild ride with that, and it ultimately opened the door for me working in the NHL and the video production and sports world in Detroit is very small. So I got asked to work for the NFL as well the next year after I started working for the NHL in the same role. As I mentioned earlier, all of these sports leagues have part-time roles in every city. They have multiple people who are photographers and videographers whose job is to capture whatever it is, a touchdown, a goal, anything fun, and send it out right away so they can post it on social media, which is obviously a very different workflow than press photographers who are there. It's all about getting it out within seconds or minutes so that can be shared in real time. And I got to learn on the job as that field of work was just beginning, as the sports leagues were wrapping their head around how these processes work. And believe it or not, they couldn't even find anybody to do it at the time.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe that because everybody back then was like,
yeah.
You know?
So I got to learn on the job. I truthfully had no business being there from a credential standpoint, but I got the opportunity through putting a couple years of work into this film and working on a bunch of other commercial freelance projects at the same time, and the stars aligned, and I got the opportunity to be a live content contributor for the NHL and the NFL, and I just completed my 7th season with the NHL and 6th season with the NFL.
So what's it like being on the field that close to the rink or that close in the locker rooms at times. So, I mean, the hair's standing up, bro. Like, what's that like? In 2 leagues, I mean, it'd be a dream job to just get one of those for some people,
Absolutely.
and you're in both.
Yeah, it was the biggest pinch me moment was one of the first times I got to shoot the Red Wings because they were my childhood
Yeah.
team. They were winning Stanley Cups when I was 6 years old, 7 years old, and so I was a huge fan. My grandfather had season tickets for the Red Wings, and my mom used to go to Olympia to see their games as a kid, and it's always been like a big part of my recreational life is cheering on the Red Wings. So it was super powerful working the first couple games that I did there, and likewise with the NFL, I've had the opportunity to work games at Lambeau Field as well, and it's now looking back, having the years of experience that I have in it, you really have to. Now it's sometimes it becomes work,
Sure.
right? And I have to constantly, not constantly, but occasionally remind myself like how cool it is because I don't want to take a second of it for granted. And I've had the incredible fortune to work, the first Detroit Lions home playoff game in 30 years. I've worked all the Thanksgiving games since I started. I got to work a NFC Championship game in Lambeau Field between Tom Brady against Aaron Rodgers during COVID with no fans in the stands.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
What was it like working through COVID?
So the NHL shut down. The NHL went into a bubble in Edmonton and in Toronto. So I did not work for the NHL during that time. I actually came up here and worked for Iron Fish. I was making hand sanitizer. And my COVID story was the week before COVID happened was the very first time that my boss at the NFL reached out to me to see if I could travel for them because they needed a piece produced for Jonathan Taylor, who at the time was the running back for University of Wisconsin. He's now with the Colts, I believe. And it was right before the NFL draft, about a month before the draft was going to start, and they had me going to his pro day. And so I traveled to Madison and basically shadowed him for a day. Drove along with him in the car, filmed his whole process, and I got sick as a dog. But I was like, this is a big opportunity. I wasn't really paying attention to the COVID stuff going on because this was like a week before it all hit.
You're right.
And maybe there was something in the news about Seattle, right? But it wasn't. I was like, I have a cold. I'm gonna tough through it. So I took a bunch of cold medicine, tough through the day, and then on the plane ride back to Detroit from Madison, tiny little airport. The only other people on the flight were NFL scouts because they're all there to watch Jonathan Taylor. And we're looking on CNN and there's like first COVID case in Michigan, first COVID case in Wisconsin. And the medicine that I took had wore off and my face, I'm just leaking, I'm coughing, I'm like making
super
this
spreading the plane.
Yeah. And so I'm sitting in this plane literally next to a scout from like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and I'm just coughing and then 2 weeks later I'm at the distillery making hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
So it was a wild time for everybody.
That's funny.
And me in particular.
With Zach, shout out to Zach Plowski. So this was right at the beginning when nothing was shut down or anything like that, but there was like, we got a case here, we got a case there. And he was actually in Detroit. This might have been around the same time.
Yeah.
You probably gave it to him on accident. I couldn't get a hold of him. Well, he came back to Manistee. We hung out for like a couple hours, and then like the next day I was texting him for something, and he wasn't responding, and I was texting, and I called, and he wasn't responding. I got a hold of his wife like a day or two later, and she was like, he's sick or something. He's just laying on the couch. And then, dude, that very night, I looked at my wife, and I go, Bets, man, I just feel like I just don't have any energy. And I went to bed, dude, and the entire bed was soaking wet within an hour, and I was just like, I don't know what's happening, but I feel like shit. So totally got COVID. I mean, that was before any of the testing or
Yeah.
anything. So I always blame it on him. You brought it to Northern
Yeah,
Michigan.
yeah. So yeah, it was a wild time, but then the NFL is such a powerhouse that it never shut down because it was in the off season
Yeah.
when COVID hit, and they figured out how to do no fans in the stands. So I have a couple pictures on my social media and still that I just have on my phone of walking into Ford Field, and there's a bunch of cardboard cutouts of fans.
Wild.
And it was, so we didn't have field access. We had to film from the first row of the stands, and it was bizarre because obviously there's typically 60,000, 70,000
Yeah.
people in there. You can't hear a thing. It's so loud, but the only thing that you could hear was the players trash talking, the players cheering on each other. So that was wild. And I think the funniest story that I have was the Thanksgiving Day game during COVID. We're filming, and I can't remember who the Lions were playing that year, but we're walking around, and it's about to be halftime, and I see this poor guy who's holding a full Thanksgiving turkey and all of the sides, and he just looks nervous as heck. I'm like, this guy got tasked with bringing this turkey from somewhere and trying to get it down to the field for the broadcast shot, right? That's going to go to 300 million people around the country watching.
Yeah.
And I put my camera stuff down, and he's like, I don't know what to do. So I just helped him. We waved down an official, and we handed the turkey down to someone on the field, and we're kind of like in an assembly line
Yeah.
of handing down the Thanksgiving meal that they were going to show. And then later that season, I got to work a snow game at Lambeau with no fans on a Sunday night in December, and I was at home in Marquette for the holidays and was able to work that game, and so I drove down to Green Bay through a snowstorm and worked a game at Lambeau, and ended up that season working their playoff run that led to the NFC Championship game.
That's good info because I thought, as an outsider looking in, that you just did the Detroit teams, but they'll send you.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, it was in the first couple of years they were still trying to find talent to fill in all these cities. In Green Bay in particular, even though it's the mecca of football, there's not maybe as big of a talent pool to work in that market as there are in other major cities, and they had people driving from Milwaukee or Chicago to work the games. And I told my boss I'm going to be in the area, and I just reached out and asked if I could work, and they're like, great, can you keep on doing that? And I said, absolutely, I want to work Packers games. And I got to work a couple games there the following season with full fans in the stands, and but now those markets are fully stocked. But I have I'll run through the list of some of the events that I've been fortunate enough to work over the years. And I worked the Pro Bowl this year in Florida. I've worked the NFC Championship game, 7 games total at Lambeau Field, and I've worked the NHL Winter Classic in Chicago, the Stadium Series this year in Columbus, and I just 2 days ago completed my 4th Stanley Cup final.
So rad.
And happy to go into some of those
Please
stories.
Please do.
So the first year that I worked the Stanley Cup final was 2022, and being I was full-time freelance at the time, and just juggling emails, and I actually missed an email from my boss, her asking if I could work the Stanley Cup final, and and she had to send a follow-up email, and I saw the follow-up, and my heart just started racing. I was like, did I just blow this by not responding to this email for a week? But luckily, I responded right away when I saw the second email. I was like, absolutely, I will do it. So I only work the home games for the team that comes out of the Eastern Conference.
Okay.
And they have someone on the West Coast who covers the home games for the team that comes out of the Western Conference. And so 3 of the 4 years that I've worked the Cup final, just by luck of the draw, the Stanley Cup presentation has happened in the East. I could do it for 10 years in the same format and never see it.
Right.
So the first year was Colorado against Tampa Bay, and it was Tampa Bay's 3rd year in a row in the Stanley Cup final. Although the first year they had was the COVID bubble, the second year it was like 2021, so it was kind of weird. It was in and out of, they're playing the Montreal Canadiens who couldn't have fans, and then in Florida they could have fans, so it was just sort of weird. And 2022 was full go around the league, and I got to work games 1, 2, and 5, I believe, or it might have been 3, 4, and 6 actually is what it was. And after working games 3 and games 4, Colorado had the opportunity to win the Stanley Cup at home in Colorado in game 5. And my brother and I were watching that game, and I was definitely rooting for Tampa Bay to bring it back.
Yeah, dude, because you were watching Red Wings hockey during that rivalry.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So even when I see Colorado on, I'm always like, "Nyeh."
Yeah, and I was the biggest, Abs hater, but in this, I was like, come on, Tampa, like bring it back, and so they did. Somehow, Tampa Bay forced a game 6 at home, and I fly back down to Tampa from Detroit, and the morning of the game, where there's production meetings and things that go on prior to a game with the potential of the Stanley Cup being presented. And my boss walked up to me and said, "Are you comfortable going out on the ice?" I said yeah, yes, absolutely. So as the clock ticked down, Colorado was up by a couple goals, I think, and one of the most surreal experiences of my life was the clock going from 3-2-1 over, and the Zamboni doors opened, and as the bench was clearing in celebration, as the players were running onto the ice, I was with maybe 2 or 3 other individuals, one from NHL Images, one from NHL Studios and the broadcast, and then I was representing the social media department for the NHL, and we ran out on the ice and just documented as much as I could. And my main job was filming, so that's what I was doing, but I had other cameras on me, and I snapped a picture of the team photo and snapped a couple photos, and all the players shared it, and all the and the league puts it up on their feeds. And now being able to have actual experience in that process, I've been extremely fortunate to have the opportunity to document the last 2 years. Florida has won it at home, and I've been in the building for each of those wins, and I've improved on the content every time. I've learned so much from watching the other photographers, from watching the other content that is produced there, having the right gear selection on me. One of my friends texted me and said, "You look like Inspector Gadget out there," because I have a shoulder rig with a cinema camera on it that has a phone attached to it, a GoPro attached to it, and then I have multiple still photo cameras around me, and so my job is to document the presentation of the Stanley Cup, to send out the content immediately, quicker than any of the other outlets that are covering it are able to share that, and those are the images that go out to the world to document that process. And
do you get photo credit on that stuff?
So the nature of the position is the league owns all the content, but we can share it on our own social media accounts after like a week.
Yeah, I'm going to be putting his Instagram in the show notes because it's fire.
And well, thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
so last year when Florida won it, I was able to go in the locker room for the celebration and documented that.
Did you wear goggles?
And
did you put plastic?
You know what?
over
I
your
just
glasses?
I had put plastics on my camera, but this year there's a big learning curve, so I put some plastic wrap on my cameras. Last year I grabbed a trash bag and punched a hole through it and put it in because I just found out the day of that I was going to be going in the locker room. I didn't know, so it worked out. And after doing it last year, knowing that there's a chance that I might get that opportunity again, I was like, okay, I need to make adjustments for the gear, and I need to have more of a wide angle lens on instead of a 70 to 200 when I'm in the locker room, because the 70 to 200 is great for on ice presentation, but in the locker room it's a lot tighter. You don't really have time to switch stuff up, especially with the multiple mediums that I'm doing. That's the biggest challenge of it, because it's not just photo or just video. I need to capture a cell phone video that they can put on TikTok. I need to capture photos that they can put in an Instagram carousel and that they can put on Facebook and Twitter. And I need to capture some cinematic stuff on a DSLR that is at a quality that maybe NHL studios will use, or the broadcast will use, or the league will use in future promotions. So part of the reason that I think I've had the opportunity is that I have taken the time to be proficient in multiple different mediums. A lot of people box themselves into, I'm a videographer,
Right.
or I'm a photographer, or I'm a content creator with my cell phone and editing, and I'm sort of a jack of all trades and maybe master of none when it comes to those different types of mediums. I have a lot of respect for team photographers and Getty Images photographers who produce absolutely incredible images, and same with cinematographers and videographers, and I fall somewhere in the middle of all that.
Well, first of all, I think your content's fantastic.
I appreciate it.
Your photography, dude, is what lights me up. I mean, just learning as you go. I mean, I always kind of lean on Zach, for example, because I think Zach's a wonderful photographer, and that's what he's always done. He went to school for that. And, I mean, but your work is it's pretty rad, man.
I really appreciate it. And the biggest, I guess, piece of advice that I would give to anybody is, like, I get questions all the time, like, how did you go to school for it? Do you learn how to do it? And it's like, I just spent time with cameras, because I could have went back to get a master's degree in that field, but instead we invested in camera gear and time spent with it, and that has definitely worked out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, like that camera there, I called Zach and I said, hey, I need to upgrade the podcast, and I said, well, I did a big YouTube research, and I said, I'm thinking about this camera, and he goes, no, that's not the one you want. Give me a day.
Yeah.
And then he's like, here, buy this. And I'm like, okay, that's the one I'll use then.
Yeah, I mean, the technology.
And then he
is
came
so
and like did all the zebra shit and made sure
Yeah.
everything was like looking good.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm constantly inspired by a bunch of people that I work with too, because they're people that are producing just the coolest content. There's a guy named Nick that I work with. He's 716 Nick on Instagram, and he makes these incredible head tracking videos. So he does it in After Effects, and he's a great videographer, and he captures all these incredible angles of goals that are non-traditional. He goes way up in the rafters and shoots sort of bird's eye view, or just keys in on the players, and it looks like they're floating. So it's all motion tracked. So in After Effects, you take the basically a pinpoint on a player's helmet, and so the entire video, the player's helmet is in the same place, or the puck is in the same place. And that was another example of someone who did that because he thought it was cool for him personally, and now he's doing it for the NHL and documenting the history of the game. And that's what I guess I'm most proud of, is that the images that I'm capturing are gonna live on far longer than I will, and they're going to be in players' living rooms and on their social media, and so that's a really powerful thing that I do not take for granted.
No, I always like looking at the arc on anything that like people put consistently out, and how it evolves and changes and gets better and better and better. Like I'll go back to the beginning of somebody's YouTube channel to look at their first video, and sometimes I go back and look at mine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, geez, dude.
There's growth. There's
Yeah.
like real. You can see it.
Yeah.
And I'm the same way with my work. And I had a really great mentor with the Red Wings, a guy named Dan Manas, who was with the team for about 10 years, and he was really one of the first people in professional sports to bring like the DSLR combo photo video content creation and set a standard level for it as well. And I got told early on when I started working, like, don't even send us that. If it doesn't look like this,
Don't send it.
don't send it. Don't give it to us. And I didn't necessarily get that from my bosses at the NHL, but I did from Dan with the Red Wings, because you're working in conjunction with that team, as well as the league. And I got really lucky with the people that I work with at the Detroit Red Wings, because not everyone who has my position around the league has a really tight relationship with their home club. They're kind of on an island. They just work for the NHL. They show up, they do their own thing, they send their stuff. But I've got to know the entire Red Wings, production and social media team really well, and am essentially just an extension of their team, and ultimately there to support what they need on a game day. And having that bar set for the standard was really something that I needed. And I think it's something that especially, content creators or photographers or videographers or anyone in the artistic realm is sensitive to criticism about their work, or designers like Jesse, for example, right?
Yeah.
Like that's because it's hours of effort that they put into, but it's also a very necessary part of that type of creation.
Yeah.
You have to be able, it's the nature of design, of photo, of video work, is having to adjust to meet the standards of whether it's your client, whether it is a professional sports league that's putting it out. It has to be at a certain level, and I think that's sort of lacking today. And folks who are coming up and being like, this is what I'm making, this is good enough, and
Yeah, they can't handle the heat.
yeah, I think that's part of where I try to set a standard for the work that I do, and hold myself accountable to some of those lessons that I learned when I was my first year in those positions.
Do you have any relationships with any of the athletes?
I get asked that all the time, and
I gotta ask,
yeah, no, you have
know.
to, right? And I would say not really. And part of the reason that I feel that I've been able to have a number of years in this role is that you can't be a fan when you're in those.
That makes sense.
When you're in those environments, you have to be professional. And the other thing that people don't know is that the PR teams for the NHL, for the NFL, for any professional sports leagues, they manage the time that the players have with media like you wouldn't believe. So for a shoot, if we're doing an interview shoot, you have to be set up, or you should be set up about an hour before. And so when they're ready, they come in, you put the mic on them, they sit down, you ask the questions. As soon as they're done, they get up and they go. It's not, yucking it up.
Yeah.
And maybe, player or people who work directly for the teams have a different relationship, but I work for the leagues. So in any capacity that I interact with a player, I'm representing the league, and I'm there to get a specific job done. And so I have definitely made the conscious decision to be a fly on a wall, do what I have to do. And that doesn't mean that I haven't had some pretty cool moments and interactions throughout that, but I can't be asking for an autograph, or
Yeah.
I can't be asking for a selfie.
Can't be a fanboy.
I can't be a fanboy, right? But like the one photo that I did take was with like the keeper of the cup, the guy who actually is carrying around the Stanley Cup. His name's Phil Pritchard. And the first year that I did that, I was like, I need to take a picture with this guy on the ice. So I took a photo of a selfie with him. That was really cool. And being a goalie growing up, I was a big fan of Henrik Lundqvist, who was a goalie for the New York Rangers for a long time. Brian Boucher was a big favorite of mine growing up, and those guys are both on like the TNT broadcast. So I've had little moments where I've been like, "Hey, big fan of yours. I wore these goalie pads because of you when I was a little kid. Like, introduce myself quick, nice to meet you," type of thing in passing. But the only event that I've worked that is actually super conducive to like interaction with players is the Pro Bowl, because everything else is like they're going to war out there. It's intense, the stakes are high, and in the Pro Bowl it's just fun. There's hardly even football being played. It's flag football, and so there was more interaction there, just like fun content and some cell phone interviews with people and more chit chatty stuff like that. But generally it's documenting, getting out and going, and that's sort of how that works.
Ever have an athlete be like, "Hey, don't print that. Don't."
Yeah,
delete that recording. I shouldn't have said that.
It's more so like if there's someone from the PR department like listening in on an interview, they'll be like, that can't be said, like type of a thing. And it's every player's a little bit different. There's a big media ask for especially captain of an NHL team, so you have to I've had the fortune to work on also like mini doc series I used to shoot some stuff freelance for Fox Sports Detroit, and in the capacity with the NHL and doing some other freelance stuff. We've done more long form like interview stuff with a producer friend of mine. We did a 5-part series for University of Michigan football a couple years ago, which was fun, and more sit down, longer form content, certainly longer form than a little social media clip anyway. I've had a lot of really cool experiences in that way.
That's awesome. So if the Lions make the Super Bowl, you go.
That I don't know. So so it's part of the reason that I've gotten the opportunity with the NHL beyond the quality of the work is also relationships with my boss and the program in general from a trust standpoint, right? Because they need people to execute at a high level without tripping the broadcast camera guy who's skating around. Like I have to be like, I'm like third or fourth priority when I'm on the ice documenting a Stanley Cup presentation. I have to make sure that I don't get in the broadcast camera's way, because that's the feed that's going out to millions of people.
Right.
So I cannot get in that guy's way. And if I do, then I'm probably never doing it again. Is the reality of it. And same with some of the NHL Images photographers. There's a guy named Bruce Bennett who is a legendary photographer for the NHL, and he just completed his 45th Stanley Cup presentation this last 2 days ago. And so being around people like that who have that type of pedigree in that world, if you look up any iconic hockey images, he's the one who's taken it. And in fact, when we were sitting around and waiting for the teams to walk in, Wayne Gretzky's on the TNT broadcast, and the broadcast crew walked in, and Wayne Gretzky noticed Bruce Bennett, a photographer, standing there, and Wayne Gretzky walked over and shook his hand and said, "Hey, Bruce, how you doing?"
That's right.
Like, went out of his way to do it. I was like, that's like doesn't really happen for photographers, right? So being just in the presence of Bruce and seeing how he goes about his work is just an honor to even rub shoulders with someone like that.
So you got all that going on, and you are a part of a family business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is actually, believe it or not, that takes up much more of my time than the sports work.
Okay, let's dive into it. I
Yeah.
mean, what is your role at Iron Fish Distillery?
Oh man. So right now it's in full-time like marketing manager. So Jesse
sense.
Denherter, who
Shout out to Jesse. Thanks for
yeah.
thanks for the bottle, brother.
Yeah, so Jesse is incredible, and he is our creative director. And I've obviously been involved with the distillery in some capacity since it's open, being my family business. And at first, it was just helping out with images, and then it was helping out with some tastings and events in the Detroit area. And then COVID hit, and then I'm up here making hand sanitizer. And as we've grown, my freelance career was growing at the same time, and it got to a point where I needed to make a decision, and so I decided to work full time with Iron Fish if they would allow me to work 60 sporting events a year, and luckily I've worked that out, and this is my second year working full time for the distillery. Before that, I was just sort of helping out in a part-time capacity, and it started as all sales, and I still did a lot of our social media and content and stuff like that, but last year it was helping out with big retail accounts and chain accounts in the Metro Detroit area. So I spent basically one day a week all of last year just driving around to different big chain stores, making sure our presentations or displays or bottle displays look nice. So a lot of like boots on the ground work. Sometimes I'm doing sales. I help out with our out of state sales. So I've been doing multiple trips to Illinois for the last couple of years, just trying to, as Jesse puts it, spread the gospel of Iron Fish. And it's been incredibly rewarding, and it's been amazing because we've now grown to a certain point where I'm able to actually work primarily on marketing because we need it, right? The business has gotten to that stage where our communication is such an important piece of it because it's a very, very complicated business. There's a lot of different parts to it. It's like three businesses in one. There's the actual production side of it, there's the distribution side of it, and then there's the end destination hospitality side of it, which I said earlier I didn't want to be in hospitality, and so now I'm not a bartender, I'm not a server at the distillery because that gives me so much anxiety even thinking about having to do that. But I support the business how I can.
Can you talk real quick? I mean, about how Iron Fish came to be, because there's a lot of
Absolutely.
Even when I opened up Manistee Beverage Company, we formed in 2017, so you guys were in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
But the stories that I would always hear, kind of as I'm getting back into the liquor business, was that your dad Richard just wanted a little tasting room. But if that's true or not, if that's just a local legend.
So I'll tell you the whole story through my lens anyway. So I was probably 2013, 2014, somewhere in there is when my dad Richard and Uncle David took a trip to Scotland, and they're big Scotch guys. It was my dad's 60th birthday. They went over there, did a bunch of distillery tours for a week, and one of the distilleries was on an operating farm. And fate had it that my Uncle David had purchased an abandoned farm next to his cabin about 10 years prior to that. And so he was sitting on an abandoned farm, and my dad said to my uncle, "You have a farm? Why don't we make a distillery?" And it was a kind of just comment after having a bunch of scotch, having a good vacation, sitting on a plane ride back, chit-chatting, kind of daydreaming about how cool that would be. And then Richard didn't really think of it for a couple months after, and he got a note from David that David had put a deposit down on a still. But it was okay because the still wouldn't be able to be delivered because there's like a year and a half wait on it, and they're so in demand that they could just sell it off if it doesn't come to fruition. In that time period, they did a bunch of research and put a business plan together, and it was truly you build it and they will come scenario. And I mean, if you've been to the distillery, the main building there originally was supposed to last 5 years without any other expansion, and within a year and a half we had to build another building. And the first day we opened was Labor Day. I can't remember if it was a Thursday or a Friday of Labor Day weekend in 2016, and all we had on the menu was a wheat vodka, when we had a white rum. I think those were the two spirits that we had on the menu. My stepmom Sarah put together like a unbelievable cocktail list. I saw a picture the other day when I was looking back through old photos, and we had like 12 cocktails on the menu. And I was like, what? How is that even possible? We only had two spirits, but that's what we had. And there were people that showed up, and I think we sold out of all of our available spirits at some point that weekend. And I remember a funny story. It was just like anything that could go wrong did go wrong. The dishwasher was broken. The ice machine stopped working, and the cherry on top was that Saturday. Michigan State had a football game on, and we had maybe 20 people in there, and we said that we were going to have the game on, and then whatever service, we couldn't find the game, and so my dad called the provider and said, I've got 300 people here waiting on this Michigan State game. And that was like the only time he lost his cool, was when he couldn't get the Michigan State game on the TV, and just how it's grown over the years has absolutely staggered me. And doing events in Detroit in particular, doing samplings and tastings in Detroit or Grand Rapids, it went from I've never heard of it to I've been there, to we go there every summer, to my friend gifted me this bottle, it's really good, to I've had your stuff but I've never been and I've always wanted to go there. And that is just wild to me.
I mean, it's a legacy. It'll be a legacy. That's your family. Just it amazes me that when they started it, the age that they started it, right?
Absolutely.
It's like I don't know anybody aside from your family that is in their 60s saying, I'm going to open a new business. And the business being liquor, distilling and growing a brand. I mean, every time I go out there, I was just out there like 3 weeks ago, and I'm just like, how many rick houses now? It's just so massive, dude, and there's so many barrels of spirit out there.
Yeah, we have about 3,000 barrels of whiskey aging. We just completed our 5th rick house, and it's been awesome to work with Jesse in particular on building the brand part of it. And as we've grown and scaled and more people have joined the team, one of the things that I wasn't necessarily anticipating was how much internal communication has to happen about what our brand standards are, what type of stuff we share on social media, what and why we market, and it all makes sense in the context of we're a growing business. But these are all decisions that were just made on the fly, years ago that really sort of set a foundation for helping build the brand. And the biggest thing that we have going for us is people's experience when they go there. The hospitality side of it, the location, the ambiance of being in the middle of 80 acres of farm field with rye growing around you, and live music going on, the different events that we put on over the years that have really gained steam, like the Kentucky Derby party that was on the front page of Detroit Free Press a couple years ago, and we sell that out every year. And so super proud to be able to continue the work that that my folks and aunt and uncle started, in 2016, and be a small part in supporting all that.
Where do you see the growth going?
I mean,
I don't even
it's
think you touch the ceiling.
yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, it's a really interesting time in the business right now because we're
Competition is like
competition is stiff. There's you know, trying to navigate out of state distribution and like just the supply chains and the availability of our product. There's just constant challenges, and I've been super impressed with how our production team, how our sales team has met all of those different challenges. So to answer your question, I have no idea where it's going to go because I could not have in a million years told you that when we started this that we'd have 5 rick houses and now we have over 100,000 people visiting every year.
That's crazy.
But the biggest piece of I think why we've had success is in addition to the experience that people have there is just collaborating with different groups around the community, like whether it's a different nonprofit that we choose to support every year with the Kentucky Derby Party, or I think my personal contribution to the relationships that we've built is I'm become friends with a lot of fly fishing guides.
Yeah, I noticed that
the area.
the last, like the trip you just put on your Instagram
Yep.
with your boys.
Yeah.
That looked like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. And yeah, there's this incredible community here in northern Michigan of just badass fly fishing anglers. That if hockey's the biggest passion in my life, fishing is right there with it. And so reaching out to those folks and ultimately also trying to support like watershed work and through Iron Fish has been really, really fun for me. Our Mad Angler line of spirits was all inspired by the work of Northern Michigan writer Michael Delp, who was the director of creative writing at Interlochen for many years. He came up with the name Mad Angler for a series of books that he wrote a number of years ago and allowed us to use that name for our estate grown spirits. And so taking that idea and running with it, Jesse had the amazing design elements added to the bottle with old fishing licenses and just the thematics around the design, and being able to bring that to life through like a marketing campaign that collaborates with other local anglers and organizations and people that are passionate about proper watershed management is the way that we've approached it, because how I look at it is like if we can't get those folks to be on board
right
and passionate about it, then we don't have a shot with anybody. And so going through those inroads, and it just so happens to be we're in a part of the world that has some legendary fishing, and from the Au River to the Manistee River, some of the best brown trout dry fly fishing this time of year. Anywhere in the world, people travel here to experience it, right? And so piggybacking off of just the natural resources that we have, how can we create a product and a brand that reflects our direct environment and the values of the people around it?
How do you take a break?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not very good at taking breaks.
I mean, definitely feel like you got high energy, in that.
Yeah, and I think you have to for the line of work that I'm in, and but how I take a break is I go fishing.
Okay.
And the good things about I've intermingled the passions of my life with also the work that I do. So sometimes those lines are really blurred. But being outdoors, fishing, I like the contrast of going from a building with 60 or 30,000 people in it to standing alone in a river and not looking at my phone at all, or going out and I do a couple camping trips every year. I actually have a bunch of family in northern Sweden, and I'm going there for a couple weeks in July, so that'll be a really nice reset. And so anything outdoor related is how I relax, even if those activities aren't necessarily physically relaxing.
Well, you definitely live in a great state for all that stuff.
No doubt.
I take this thing and just as soon as I go home, it's like eek, I'm good. You know,
Yeah.
you got to get away from it.
Yeah,
You
and
know.
so I know you've got some, like, my experience with, like, knowing you was through, I used to call you to see if you wanted any any bottles every now and then, because that was one of the duties that I had back in the day for Iron Fish, was like, here's a list of accounts, and I know James will always take some at Manistee Beverage, and but I've been following you for a long time and all the content that you put out, and so I'm actually interested in some of the stuff that you got going on with, like, the race and stuff like that too.
Yeah, well, you can see the mess I have over there. I've been spending the last week or so slowly getting all the finisher medals and stuff organized. We're going to have a ton this year of participants, at least for Run the Pier. Rusty Fish is the one I'm a runner,
Mm-hmm.
and I love Run the Pier, and it's getting to the point now where I just have to manage the amount of people that participate in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it gets more and more expensive, but it's the race that costs us the most money to put on, but it's to a point now where I can, or I should say it's, my partners Dylan and Zach, we've got everything, we just go set it up.
Yeah.
So it's the Rusty Fish that I just, gravel bike racing in particular northern Michigan is super competitive.
Yep.
And it's really hard to get a race to go, We've been kind of stagnant with participation for since the beginning. We've had basically the same amount and usually the same faces every year that come, which is great. It's a great party. I think it's a beautiful race for northern Michigan. It's all in back county stuff. But yeah, as a sidebar, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit, maybe a little more off camera about the Rusty Fish. I've been, Iron Fish has always been a big supporter of us, and the first year we did the 100 was 2 Iron Fish and back, which was great because half of the participants just stayed at Iron Fish when they got 50 miles in and said, we'll get a ride back to base camp after. And then we did a loop around when we did a 120 mile 2 years ago, and it's in our minds trying to create more participation with more athletes. It was like we got to maybe reduce it a little bit, so we've done a metric and a half metric the last 2 years, and
Cool.
That's shown a little bit of a spike, but ultimately I think at least in my mind, I have routes that are just to and from Iron Fish, start and finish at Iron Fish.
Love that.
That maybe we should have a longer conversation about.
No doubt.
But they're shorter routes. They're still shorter routes. It's a half metric and a full metric, starting and finishing there. And the one, I think it was the first year. The first year, speaking with Richard and Sarah, we were going to have it start and finish at Iron Fish, but the date that we had picked was a harvest or something. We were doing something with a section of the property that we needed to use, so we couldn't do it. But I definitely think that it would elevate everything.
Yeah,
that'd be selfishly,
awesome. Yeah.
it would elevate the race having it there, start and finish there for sure.
No,
so.
that'd be awesome to chat about, and it also just seems like you're super involved with Manistee in general, right? I mean, obviously having the presence of the storefront there for a while, but all the events that you've been working on, and I've always really enjoyed just hanging out here. It's such a cool town, and it actually reminds me a lot of my hometown of Marquette, just slightly, similar vibes, but little different situation, but it's always felt familiar to me, and it's a great place to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm born and raised here. I'm a little biased, I guess, but my passion is this podcast, and I really just enjoy, and I hope that to a certain extent with the people that I have on, that I'm shining a little bit brighter light on the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not just the city of Manistee, it's the county, because like I said, our gravel bike race goes all over the county, and especially the 100 and the 120. I mean, that spanned some areas that even I had never been.
Yeah.
And the business, this, and being a small business guy, whatever I can do to, even if it's just a little bit, to help lift up, these small, because it's a grind.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a small business owner. I mean, you had a couple, and it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And I don't think everybody thinks that, you're not an overnight success until you're an overnight success.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And it takes years to do that. And, I'm still working on it. But I miss the store some days I don't. But
Yeah, well, my first job was in a liquor store in Marquette growing up, and it's almost like a sitcom, like every day, right? There's some real challenging aspects to it, but just like the life experience that I got from working for like 2 years at a liquor store when I was like 17, 18 was, I'll remember that forever.
I mean, there's a novel in my head with all the interactions that I had over the years down there. But and that's why I love the story of Iron Fish, because it kind of catapulted. And like I said, like the urban legend was that, your dad and uncle just wanted to sit around and have a little tasting room for their buddies, and then like literally overnight it went from little distillery to regional to statewide to now you're in other states, and it's
Yeah, the growth was never part of the plan until it was necessary to host all the people, to keep the, feeding the beast, as we say. And so again, the funnest part right now is coming up with, we've had 9 years now of giving people hopefully a really great experience when they visit us. So like, what's the next part? What can we do now that we have an events team? We've never really had that before. We've had maybe one person that has worked with us for a year or two, and that was great, and then they move on to something else. But just the capacity part now is really fun to think of the possibilities of what kind of things we can do, moving forward. Next year is going to be our 10th anniversary, which is just wild. And something that I'm super proud of was this year we had our first ever like Mad Angler Day. And so that was just sort of trying to be a celebration of northern, Michigan trout angling culture, and did a little fundraiser for the Spirit of the Woods Conservation Club over on Bear Creek, and ultimately got a bunch of friends of mine and people who are interested in the angling world to come over to the distillery, set up sort of like a little expo, kind of like maybe like a fly fishing expo, and that was sort of our vision for it. And we wanted to do something like that for a couple of years, and so we made it happen in the middle of May. And just that experience of saying, let's do something, let's see how it goes, let's see what the response is. It was a great response. People loved it, and it all was, done by, just coordinating, making phone calls, and now that's set a certain level of what we did, last year, and now, the wheels are turning on like, how can we make this so much better for next year, make it bigger, and get, more big names involved in that world, and what kind of an awesome experience can we have? Because on the business side of it, we were seeing people show up for that didn't, wouldn't necessarily show up on a random Saturday. Last night we had our first trivia night ever, and there were 7 teams of trivia, goers that showed up who've never been to the distillery before. And
there
so
are
just
some
coming
hardcore
up with
people
there
that
are
into trivia, dude. I mean, they will travel.
Yes. So like kudos to our events team for just coming up with that concept and just following through on it. And there's like real pressure in pulling, experiences like that off, because the very nature of our business is that, like, if it's not a good experience for people, that is your impression, right?
Right.
And they're not going to come back if the first one isn't good.
Yep. That's what's
And
clutch about having an event team, dude.
Yep.
'Cause events are not an easy thing to pull together.
Yeah, we have a couple amazing women who have just started working with us recently who are doing an excellent job at you know, coming up with concepts and executing.
Yeah. Trivia night at Iron Fish.
Yeah. So come check it out Thursdays. Thursdays this summer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So is it kind of? Did you pick that day because of other? Because my son, for example, does trivia every Monday at North Channel. Him and a group of buddies and like their parents, and they take up a whole table, and that place gets packed for that.
Yeah, I think I wasn't necessarily part of the decision making process for what day, but it's like a combination of looking at, maybe our slower day. What can we do to generate maybe more business on a particular day? Because I mean, we're pretty slammed on the weekends,
Yeah.
especially in the summer for the most part. Doesn't really make sense to try to, mix that in. Also looking at what other local businesses are doing trivia on what nights. We don't necessarily want to do the same thing and then splinter, the folks who are into it and ultimately, people showed up and that was great. So, and hopefully, I'm sure they had a good time. It seemed like, sure seemed like they did. So, looking forward to seeing how that progresses. And ultimately, like, one of the coolest things that I said earlier was the collaborations, right? Like
Yeah.
with all the local groups. And like this week, we're going to have a whole bunch of strawberries from Gross Nickel Farm because it's strawberry season, right? So we're incorporating strawberries and simple syrups, even on like a dessert pizza on as garnishes. So, I have
You're doing that this weekend?
yeah. So that's I think they just picked them up yesterday. So it's going to be happening, but it's a really short window, right?
Right.
Strawberry season's a couple weeks. They'll probably be out by the 4th of July. So really working on and communicating those collaborations are what is at the core of what people I think were interested in our business to begin with. And so making sure we're telling those stories both at the distillery in a interpersonal communication from our staff that's there, but just as importantly through our social media, through our website. Like, what are we about? Well, we get our maple syrup from the Griner family sugar bush, right? And Scott is an absolute machine of a man who has 4,000 trees tapped and produces all of our maple syrup. And he also fixes, he's like a part-time maintenance guy for us too. He'll fix issues that he has with employees' cars, and like he's just this incredible human that is such a key part of what we do. And that's how we look at our collaborations with other farmers who are growing grain for us, with other farms that are producing whatever it is that they produce that we incorporate either on our menu, a cocktail or food menu, or in the production of our spirits.
The maple syrup. We love the maple syrup, by the way.
It's something else, yeah.
And my 9-year-old and I tapped a couple of trees in our front yard this year. And it was a process. We were watching YouTube videos. How do we do this? Okay. And I think we got, it was like 5 gallons.
Yeah.
And we took it to a good buddy of mine. He does a sap camp every year. And they have like one of those huge water tank things.
Oh, yeah.
Of,
big boiler. Or,
you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And he had it up on a forklift, and he had the spout coming down into this homemade furnace to cook everything. And we brought our 5 gallons, and he checked the sugar content in that little deal or whatever. He's like, "Oh, this is good." And he was just like, "Well, that's about a pint." So he just gave me one from last year. And we just sat there and hung out, and Mary got to see the process and everything. But I'm like,
it's just such a cool cultural thing. One of my favorite things to do is go over to Scott's when he's making sugar, because it is just like, who does that, right? Who is doing? And there's people like that all over this county.
Can I ask, before we wrap this up, speaking of the syrup and like the honey, where did that, how did that come into the
fold? Yeah. So, I mean, the maple syrup was really, it started because David, who was and still is sort of like, my dad likes to call him like the palate of Iron Fish. He's the one who's really dialing in the flavors and the processes that we go through to make our spirits. And when we first opened, we wanted to have whiskey on the menu, right away within the first year. But how do you do that when you haven't been aging whiskey for 4 or 5 years? So what a lot of distilleries do as kind of a behind the scenes look at the industry is they purchase whiskey, right? There's a lot of Michigan distilleries that purchase whiskey from Indiana, and we were one of them to start. And part of our expansion process is that we don't want to be doing that anymore. We're making stuff from scratch, and so that's why a couple of years ago we went through the production expansion. But to start, we wanted to have a good whiskey on the menu. So David selected a whiskey that we purchased that we could eventually replicate the mash bill of and produce on our own, or produce something similar. So he got this high rye bourbon. And instead of just repackaging it, bottling it, which most places do, he wanted to manipulate it in some way. And barrel finishing is something that's been going on for a while in the industry. And he wanted to take a local spin on that. So he figured, why not put some maple syrup in a bourbon barrel for a couple months, empty it out, and then put bourbon back into those same barrels. So the first sort of experiment that took place with that was in 2017 with our bourbon finished in maple syrup barrels. And so he met Scott somehow. I'm not even sure how. And that's how that started. So we bought 50 gallons of maple syrup from Scott, put it in a bourbon barrel, let it sit for a couple months, emptied it out, put that purchased bourbon back into that barrel, aged it for a few more months, and now our process has changed that. So now we're finishing it in maple barrels for a year.
Yeah.
And that product in particular really spurred the growth of Iron Fish. It was something like the 20th highest selling domestic whiskey in the state last year, which if you go to a liquor store, you see how many bottles of a bourbon that there is. So it's we did something like 50,000 bottles of it, which is just mind-boggling. And Scott, to his credit, has been able to scale his own production to accommodate for that, which is incredible, because all our maple syrup comes from him. We tap a real small amount of trees on the farm, and then the honey is Sleeping Bear honey. They set up some of their hives right on the farm, and we barrel age the honey. So the honey comes right from our farm, courtesy of Sleeping Bear honey. And actually, getting back to the maple syrup, one of my favorite products that we haven't brought here for you is our 4-cask bourbon.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite.
It's mine too.
There's so much complexity in it. I love this.
And so that just won us a really awesome award at the American Spirit Councils of Tasters, called the Ascot Awards. There's a guy named Fred Minnick who's essentially whiskey content creator, who's sort of at like the pinnacle of that industry, and he started this American Spirit Council of Tasters Awards, and that got a double platinum for best barrel finished whiskey, and so we're super proud of that. And why it's so unique is that in addition to our bourbon finished in maple syrup barrels, so it's the same base bourbon, and in addition to the maple finish, we also get Caribbean rum casks, we get Spanish sherry barrels and French cognac barrels. Finish the same base bourbon and all those different types of barrels, blend them together to make 4-cask. So if you like the maple finish, you get a little of that maple sweetness, but this is just so much more complex. It's almost like a cigar blend. Oftentimes, cigar blends are maybe a cognac finish or a sherry finish. This is a little of each of those, and we've done some really cool things with this product, custom blending for different accounts around the state. So super proud of the work that our distilling and blending team has done to get these products to a level, because we're still very much a craft distillery, right? And so the batches, having consistency among the batches is really key, and our production and blending team has done an exceptional job at, we try to I mentioned trying to set this quality standard level for the work I do in marketing and communications, and our production and distilling team does that with the quality level of the stuff that we put out.
Dude, this has been a rad conversation.
Yeah, I love it.
I mean, you're doing some really cool things, man. And my hope is that you stay, passionate about everything that you're doing at the level that you're doing it right now, because this has been really cool, man. It was amazing to get to know you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Likewise.
I truly believe that the universe is guiding you.
Thank
There's
you.
more to come from Troy Anderson for sure.
I hope so.
Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you.
Good to have you.